It was a Tuesday evening when I stumbled upon the truth, a moment that would forever alter the course of my life. I had come home from work early, eager to surprise my wife, Emily, with her favorite takeout. The aroma of garlic and herbs was still lingering in the air, and I could hear the soft hum of a cooking show coming from the kitchen. I smiled, picturing her standing over the stove, her hair tied up in a messy bun, fully immersed in her culinary world. But as I stepped into our small, cozy home, a sense of unease washed over me. The kitchen door was ajar and I could see the flickering light of the television illuminating the room. I called out to her, but there was no response. I shrugged it off, thinking she was just focused on her show. I set the takeout on the dining table and walked toward the kitchen, where I noticed her phone lying on the counter. It was buzzing incessantly, the screen lighting up with a name that sent a chill down my spine. Marco. I had heard that name before. Marco was Emily's cooking instructor, a charismatic chef known for his flair in the kitchen and a reputation that preceded him. I picked up the phone, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and dread. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Just finished prepping your favorite dish." My heart dropped. In that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My wife was cheating on me with this man. Shock coursed through my veins as I replayed the last few weeks in my mind. Late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she had been acting distant. I felt betrayal and confusion swirling inside me like a storm. How could she do this to me? I thought we had something special, something worth fighting for. But here I was, staring at the evidence of her infidelity, feeling as if the walls were closing in around me. As I stood there, my hands trembling, I heard the sound of the kitchen door creaking open. Emily walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Oh, you're home early," she exclaimed, her voice cheerful but with a hint of surprise. The moment her eyes fell on the phone in my hand, her expression changed. Panic flashed across her face and I could see the realization dawn on her. I didn't say a word, I couldn't. I felt like I was living in a nightmare and the only thing I could muster was a cold stare. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was paralyzed by the weight of the betrayal. Instead, I simply dropped the phone onto the counter and it landed with a dull thud, the message still glowing ominously. "What's this?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's facade crumbled. "It's not what you think," she pleaded, but I could see the guilt etched on her face. The truth hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I felt anger bubbling up inside me, but I didn't want to react in the heat of the moment. I needed to process this, to understand the full scope of the betrayal before I acted. As she tried to explain, I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching this scene unfold as if it were a movie. The woman I loved was standing before me, but she felt like a stranger. I could see the cracks in our marriage widening, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The chef, Marco, had not only stolen my wife's heart, he had also shattered my trust. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not let this go unpunished. I would not allow her to continue living a life of luxury while I wallowed in heartbreak. I would take action. It was time for me to reclaim my power in this situation. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was walking through a fog, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of anger, sadness, and humiliation. I replayed the scene in the kitchen over and over, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this to me? What had I done to deserve such a betrayal? I felt like a puppet with its strings cut, left to flail aimlessly in the aftermath of my wife's infidelity. Every time I saw Emily, I was reminded of her betrayal, and it was suffocating. She tried to reach out to mend the rift that had formed between us, but I couldn't bear to look her in the eye. The warmth that once filled our home had been replaced by a chilling silence. I spent hours at work, finding solace in the mundane tasks that kept my mind occupied. But even there, the whispers of doubt plagued me. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concern with a forced smile. I was angry, not just at Emily, but also at myself. I felt humiliated, knowing that I had been the last to realize what was happening right under my nose. I had trusted her completely, and she had shattered that trust without a second thought. Each morning I would wake up, glancing at her sleeping form beside me, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake and demand answers, but I was paralyzed by the fear of what that would mean for us. As I navigated this emotional labyrinth, a dark thought began to take root in my mind. I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel the pain I was experiencing. I envisioned Marco, the man who had so brazenly invaded my life, losing everything he had worked for. It was a twisted sense of justice, but it felt like the only way to regain control over my shattered world. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that this was the path I needed to take. I began to formulate a plan. The first step was to gather evidence, proof that would not only confirm the affair but also expose Marco for the kind of person he truly was. I knew Emily would try to cover for him, to downplay the severity of their relationship, but I would not let her. I started by paying closer attention to her behavior. I noted the times she received texts, the way she smiled at her phone, the little things that pointed to their illicit relationship. One evening, while Emily was out running errands, I took the opportunity to dig deeper. I remembered seeing Marco's name on the restaurant's website where he worked. I decided to visit the place, posing as a potential customer. As I walked through the doors of the upscale restaurant, I was struck by the ambience, soft lighting, elegant decor, the tantalizing aroma of gourmet food wafting through the air. It was a world I had never been a part of, and I felt a pang of resentment as I realized this was the lifestyle Emily had chosen over me. I approached the bar and struck up a conversation with the bartender, casually probing about Marco. I learned he had quite the reputation, not just for his culinary skills, but also for his charm with the ladies. It made my blood boil. I imagined him in the kitchen, flirting with every woman who walked through the door, including my wife. I left the restaurant with a heavy heart and a growing determination to expose him. The next week, I returned to the restaurant, this time with a plan. I carefully observed Marco, noting his interactions with the staff and customers. I could see how he commanded attention, his confidence radiating as he moved about the kitchen. But beneath that facade, I was certain there was something darker. I began to gather snippets of conversations, overhearing his flirtatious banter and the way he treated his coworkers. It was a side of him I wanted to exploit. I spent hours compiling evidence, screenshots of text messages and accounts from other employees. I wanted to create a dossier that would leave no room for doubt. The moral implications of my actions weighed heavily on me. Was I really willing to ruin a man's career just to satisfy my thirst for revenge? Each time I hesitated, I would remember the pain Emily had caused me, the way she had shattered my trust. I justified my actions by telling myself that Marco deserved to pay for his role in this betrayal. As I meticulously planned my next steps, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control. The anger that had consumed me was transforming into a focused determination. I was ready to confront the chef who had stolen my wife's heart and to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. With each passing day, my plan solidified in my mind, and I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since the moment I discovered Emily's betrayal. I had gathered enough evidence to take action against Marco, the chef who had taken my wife from me. I knew it was time to execute my plan, but a part of me grappled with the moral implications of what I was about to do. Was I really willing to ruin this man's life, or was I just trying to mask my own pain with revenge? The following week, I made my way back to the restaurant for the third time, this time with a sense of resolve. I had compiled a folder of evidence, including text messages and witness accounts from employees who had seen Marco flirting with patrons. As I approached the restaurant, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. This was it, I was stepping into the lion's den. Upon entering, I was greeted by the familiar ambience, the soft chatter of patrons, the clinking of glasses, the mouth-watering aroma of gourmet dishes being prepared in the kitchen. I made my way to the bar where I had previously spoken with the bartender. I needed a way to get my evidence into the right hands, and I had a plan. I introduced myself to the restaurant manager, a woman named Sarah, who exuded authority and confidence. I casually mentioned that I had a concern about one of the staff members. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Is it about Marco?" she asked, her tone shifting to a more serious one. I nodded, and she gestured for me to follow her to a quieter area away from the bustling dining room. Once we were alone, I took a deep breath and began to explain my concerns. I told her that I had evidence of Marco's inappropriate behavior with customers and staff, emphasizing that it was affecting the restaurant's reputation. I presented her with the folder I had prepared, watching her expression change as she flipped through the pages. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she processed the information. "What do you want me to do with this?" she asked, her tone cautious but curious. "I think it's important for you to investigate. If this is true, you need to protect your business and your employees," I replied, my voice steady. I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to bring down the man who had betrayed me. As the conversation progressed, I could tell Sarah was taking my claims seriously. She asked for more details about my relationship with Emily and how I had come to learn about Marco's behavior. I painted the picture of a devoted husband blindsided by infidelity, emphasizing the emotional toll it had taken on me. I wanted her to see me as a victim, and it seemed to be working. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah promised to look into the matter. I left the restaurant with a mixture of triumph and apprehension. I had set the wheels in motion, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was crossing a line I might never be able to uncross. The thought of ruining Marco's career weighed heavily on my conscience, but I quickly dismissed it. He had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. Over the next few days, I anxiously awaited news from Sarah. I felt like I was living in a limbo, caught between my desire for revenge and the haunting thought of what it meant to go through with my plan. I kept replaying the events in my mind, reminding myself of Emily's betrayal and the pain it had caused me. It was all too easy to justify my actions when I thought of her laughter, echoing in my mind the way she had looked at Marco with a glimmer of excitement that had once been reserved for me. Finally, I received a call from Sarah. She informed me that she had conducted an investigation and that there was enough evidence to confront Marco about his behavior. I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with dread. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here, and I would get to see the fallout of my actions firsthand. The following day, I returned to the restaurant, bracing myself for what was about to unfold. I waited in a nearby cafe, my heart racing as I watched the employees come and go. I had chosen this spot deliberately, ensuring I would be able to witness the confrontation without being seen. I wanted to savor the moment, to feel the weight of my revenge as it unfolded. When Sarah finally confronted Marco, I could see the tension in his body language from across the street. He initially appeared confident, but as she laid out the evidence, his demeanor shifted. I watched as his face turned pale, the bravado fading away. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me knowing that he was facing the consequences of his actions. But as the confrontation continued, I began to feel a pang of regret. Was this really worth it? Watching a man's life unravel before me felt different than I had imagined. I thought about Emily, how she would react when she learned of Marco's downfall. Would she feel guilt? Would she finally understand the pain she had caused me? Or would she simply move on to someone else, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my shattered life? As I sat there, the reality of my actions began to sink in. This was not just about revenge. It was about the emotional turmoil that had consumed me. I had been so focused on making Marco pay that I had lost sight of what I truly wanted: closure, understanding, and perhaps a way to heal. The confrontation unfolded like a scene from a movie, and I was merely an observer, hidden away in the cafe across the street. I watched as Sarah laid out the evidence with a calm authority, her voice steady as she recounted the messages and witness accounts. Marco's expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief, and I felt an unsettling mix of satisfaction and guilt wash over me. This was the moment I had orchestrated, yet witnessing it firsthand made me question my intentions. I could see the sparks of anger flare in Marco's eyes as he attempted to defend himself. He sputtered out excuses, claiming that the messages were taken out of context, that he was just being friendly. But Sarah was unwavering, presenting the evidence with a clarity that left little room for doubt. I leaned closer, straining to hear every word, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, and for a moment I thought I might burst from the anticipation. Finally, Marco's bravado crumbled. I watched as he shifted from defiance to desperation, trying to salvage his reputation. "I didn't mean any harm," he pleaded, his voice strained. "It was just harmless flirting. You can't fire me for that." But Sarah wasn't buying it. "This isn't just flirting, Marco. It's unprofessional and unacceptable behavior. I can't have someone like you representing this restaurant," she replied, her tone firm. I felt a strange sense of power in that moment, knowing that I had played a part in bringing him down. The chef who had charmed my wife was now facing the consequences of his actions, and I took a moment to relish the victory. However, as Marco's world began to crumble, I felt a shift within myself. I had envisioned this moment as a cathartic release, a chance to reclaim my dignity. Instead, it felt hollow. Watching him plead for mercy, I couldn't help but think of the human cost of my revenge. I had wanted to hurt him for what he had done to me, but now I was faced with the reality that this was a man with dreams, ambitions, and a career that would be destroyed because of my actions. As I sat there, I caught a glimpse of Marco's face, the despair etched into his features. I felt a pang of empathy that I hadn't anticipated. He was no longer just the villain in my story. He was a person, flawed and human, just like me. In that moment, I realized that my revenge was not as sweet as I had imagined. It was tainted with the bitter taste of regret. The confrontation ended with Marco being escorted out of the restaurant. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Was this really what I wanted? I had set out to ruin him, to make him pay for his betrayal, but in doing so I had also lost a part of myself. I had allowed my anger to dictate my actions, and now I was left with the heavy burden of guilt. As I left the cafe, my mind raced with conflicting thoughts. I walked the streets aimlessly, replaying the confrontation in my mind. I thought about Emily and how she would react to Marco's firing. Would she feel guilty? Would she see the consequences of her actions? Or would she simply move on, unaffected by the chaos her choices had caused? When I finally returned home, I was met with an eerie silence. Emily was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. The moment I walked in, she looked up, her expression a mixture of confusion and worry. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. She must have sensed the tension in the air, the aftermath of the storm I had unleashed. I hesitated, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. I had thought that confronting Marco would bring me clarity, but all it had done was deepen my inner turmoil. Instead of feeling victorious, I felt lost. "I found out what you were doing with Marco," I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to realization, and I could see the color drain from her face. "You did something, didn't you?" she asked, her voice tinged with panic. "What did you do?" "I went to the restaurant," I admitted, feeling the words spill out as if they had been trapped inside me. "I talked to the manager, I showed her everything." Her eyes widened, and I could see the fear creep in. "You got him fired?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to meet her gaze. In that moment, I felt the full weight of my actions come crashing down. Emily's reaction was not what I had expected. I thought she would be angry, perhaps even defensive, but instead she looked crushed. "Do you understand what you've done?" she said, her voice breaking. "You've ruined someone's life." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had wanted her to feel the pain I felt, but now I was faced with the reality of what I had done. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The satisfaction of revenge had turned sour, and I was left grappling with the consequences of my actions. As we faced each other in the dim light of our living room, I realized that it wasn't just Marco's life that had been shattered. It was our relationship, too. The trust that once bound us together had been irrevocably broken, and I could see the fractures widening with each passing moment. I had wanted to make her understand the pain of betrayal, but now I was left questioning whether I had done more harm than good. In my quest for revenge, I had lost sight of the love we once shared. I had to confront the reality that the path I chose did not lead to healing, but rather deeper wounds. The silence between us stretched into an uncomfortable void, each second heavy with unspoken words. I could see the turmoil in Emily's eyes as she processed the reality of what had just happened. I had hoped that exposing Marco would somehow bring clarity to our relationship, but instead it felt like I had opened a Pandora's box of pain and regret. "Why would you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Did you think this would make everything better?" I struggled to find the words. I thought, I thought it would show you the consequences of your choices," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to understand how much you hurt me." Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You didn't just hurt him, you hurt me too. You ruined everything." Her voice cracked with emotion, and I could see the weight of my actions crashing down on her. I had set out to make a statement, but I had only succeeded in deepening the wounds we both carried. "I didn't want to lose you," I admitted, my heart racing as I faced the truth of my intentions. "I thought if I made him pay, you would realize what you were throwing away. I thought it would make you see me again." She looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You think this was about him? This was about us. You think I didn't know what I was risking? I didn't need you to take matters into your own hands. I needed you to talk to me." Her words struck me like a slap in the face. I had been so consumed by my anger that I had failed to consider her perspective. I had wanted revenge, but in doing so I had neglected the very foundation of our relationship: communication and trust. "Emily, I started, but she interrupted me. "You think you can just fix this by ruining someone else's life?" she shouted, her voice filled with anguish. "You think that will make everything right? You don't get it." Her fury was palpable, and I felt a knot of guilt twist in my stomach. I had wanted her to feel remorse for her actions, but instead, I had only compounded her pain. I realized that my desire for revenge had blinded me to the real issue at hand: our relationship and the cracks that had formed within it. I was angry, and I didn't know how to handle it, I confessed, my voice breaking. "I thought if I hurt him, it would somehow make me feel better, make you realize what you were doing. But now I see that I was wrong." Emily's expression softened slightly, but the hurt was still evident in her eyes. "You think I don't feel guilty? You think I don't regret what I did? I'm already living with the consequences of my choices. You didn't need to add to that pain." As the weight of her words settled in, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I had let my anger dictate my actions, and in doing so, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. I had wanted to reclaim my power, but instead, I had only succeeded in pushing her further away. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to make sense of this chaos. I thought if I took action, it would help me feel in control again." Emily looked at me with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "Control? You think that's what this is about?" "It's about trust. It's about love. If you had just talked to me, we could have worked through this together." Her words pierced through the fog of my anger, and I felt the walls I had built around myself begin to crumble. I had been so focused on revenge that I had neglected the one thing that could have led us to healing: communication. I realized that my actions had not only hurt Marco, but had also jeopardized the chance of rebuilding my relationship with Emily. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking as the reality of my choices hit me. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think it through. I just wanted to make you see how much you hurt me." Emily wiped her tears away, her expression softening as she took a deep breath. "I know you're hurting," she said, her voice quieter now. "But hurting others isn't going to fix what's broken between us. We need to find a way to talk about this, to understand each other." As we stood there, the tension between us began to shift. I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, and for the first time since discovering her infidelity, I felt a glimmer of possibility. Maybe this confrontation could lead us to a place of healing if we were willing to be honest and vulnerable with each other. "I want to understand," I admitted, my voice stronger now. "I want to know why you made those choices. I need to hear it from you." Emily nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise to listen. No more revenge, no more anger, just honesty." I agreed, knowing that this was the first step toward rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. We sat down together on the couch, and as she began to share her side of the story, I felt the weight of my actions begin to lift. This was not just about Marco, it was about us, our love, and the choices that had led us to this moment. As Emily spoke, I listened intently, allowing her words to wash over me. I wanted to understand the pain that had driven her to seek solace in another man. I realized that while my actions had been fueled by anger, hers had been born from a place of loneliness and disconnect. In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wanted to work through our pain together, to find a way to heal the wounds that had been inflicted. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to fight for our relationship. Revenge had not brought me the closure I sought. Instead, it had opened the door to deeper understanding. As the conversation unfolded, I began to see a path forward, a way to rebuild not only my trust in her but also her trust in me. It was a long road ahead, but I was ready to take the first steps toward healing together. As Emily shared her side of the story, I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crack. She spoke with a mix of shame and vulnerability, revealing the loneliness she had felt in our marriage. I listened intently, absorbing every word as she recounted how she had sought validation outside our relationship. Her infidelity wasn't just about Marco, it was about the emotional disconnect that had grown between us over time. I felt like I was losing you, she admitted, her voice trembling. You were always busy with work and I felt invisible. I thought I could find that spark again, but instead, I just created more pain. Her honesty struck a chord deep within me. I had been so consumed by my own hurt that I had failed to see the struggles she was facing. I realized that while my actions had been driven by anger and a desire for revenge, hers had stemmed from a place of vulnerability and desperation. It was a painful truth, but one that brought us closer together in this moment. I never wanted to hurt you, she continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. I thought I could fill the void, but I only ended up making everything worse. I regret it every day. As she spoke, I felt the anger I had harbored begin to dissipate. I could see the remorse in her eyes, and I understood that we were both flawed individuals who had made mistakes. It was a humbling realization, and I knew that if we were to move forward, we had to acknowledge our shared responsibility in the breakdown of our marriage. I'm sorry too, I said, my voice steady. I let my anger and pride dictate my actions. Instead of confronting you, I sought revenge. I thought it would make me feel better, but all it did was push us further apart. Emily nodded, the weight of our shared pain hanging heavily in the air. I want to rebuild our relationship, she said softly, but it's going to take time and effort from both of us. I agreed wholeheartedly. I understood that healing wouldn't happen overnight. It would require honest conversations, vulnerability, and a commitment to rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. But for the first time since the discovery of her infidelity, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were both willing to confront the issues that had driven us apart, and that was a significant first step. In the days that followed, we began to navigate the complexities of our relationship together. We established new patterns of communication, making a conscious effort to check in with each other daily. I found myself actively listening to Emily, seeking to understand her feelings rather than letting my anger cloud my judgment. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the moments that had brought us to this point. It was challenging at times. There were moments of doubt and insecurity, but we faced them together. I learned to express my feelings without resorting to blame, and Emily worked to be more open and honest about her needs. We began to rediscover the love that had brought us together in the first place, slowly peeling back the layers of hurt and resentment that had accumulated over time. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I looked over at her and felt a sense of warmth fill my heart. Emily smiled back at me, and I could see the spark of connection that had been missing for so long. It was a reminder that while we had faced immense challenges, we were still capable of love and healing. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned throughout this painful journey. Revenge had only brought temporary satisfaction. It was in the vulnerability and honesty of confronting our issues together that true healing began to take place. I realized that trust is not merely given, it is earned through consistent actions and open dialogue. In the end, I understood that our relationship was not defined by the betrayal but by our willingness to face it head-on. We chose to rebuild, to grow, and to learn from our mistakes. It was a long road ahead, but I was ready to walk it with Emily by my side. As I looked at her, I felt a renewed sense of hope for our future. We had both made mistakes, but we were determined to learn from them. Together, we would forge a new path, one built on trust, communication, and a deeper understanding of each other. And in that moment, I knew that love, though tested, could emerge stronger than ever. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were partners, committed to navigating the complexities of life together. With that realization, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The past would always be a part of our story, but it would not define our future. Together, we would create a new chapter, one filled with love, growth, and resilience. This was our journey, and we were ready to embrace it, hand in hand.